Good evening, everyone, and welcome to COS at Home. I am your host, Jonathan Biod, and thank you so much for bearing with us. We're a little late here because we were dealing with some technical difficulties, but so glad that you are here with us for another exciting program tonight. And we've got a special program because we are going to be covering last night, which was one of the most historic nights in the history of our great nation. Regardless of how the election played out, we knew there was going to be a lot to break down and discuss. And who better to do it on COS at Home than the president of Convention of States, Mark Meckler, and our senior advisor, Senator Rick Santorum. We will also be hearing from Rita Peters, our senior vice president for legislative affairs. And you will also have an opportunity to ask our guests some questions. So please keep your keyboard ready. But before we get to our discussion, let me first say, for anyone that is new to the show and organization, I'd like to welcome you to Convention of States. We are a grassroots movement focused on the goal of utilizing Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution to call a convention for proposing amendments to the Constitution that would reduce the size and scope of the federal government, impose fiscal restraints on the federal government, and place term limits on all members of Congress and federal officials. In order to hold this convention, we need 34 states to pass our resolution, and to date, we have 19 states that have done so. So welcome, and thank you so much for being here and supporting Convention of States. Also, folks, be sure to stick around to the end of the program when I will announce who our guest will be for our upcoming December episode. You don't want to miss that. Now, before we get to Mark and Senator Santorum, Rita was not able to join us live this evening, but she prepared a video message to tell you all about what happened regarding Convention of States election activity last night. So let's go ahead and hear from Rita.
Everyone, I'm Rita Peters, the Senior Vice President of Legislative Affairs with Convention of States Action. While most of the nation's attention last night was fixed on the presidential and congressional elections, my attention was riveted on the state legislatures. Not only are they the ones who retain the bulk of policymaking authority under our Constitution, but they are also the only ones who can bring about an Article 5 convention to propose constitutional amendments that will bring about the structural reforms our nation so desperately needs. Now, going into last night, our friends at Ballotpedia had identified 11 battleground chambers in the state legislatures. But I was primarily interested in the ones in states that have not yet passed our COS application: the Michigan House, the Minnesota House, the New Hampshire Senate and House, and the Pennsylvania Senate and House. What happens in those chambers has a huge impact on our ability to move COS forward in those states. So far, here's what we know. The Michigan House appears to have been won back by the Republicans, while the Senate remains in Democrat control by a 2-vote majority. The Minnesota House has yet to be called, and the New Hampshire House and Senate both have not yet been called. And finally, the Pennsylvania House hasn't been called yet, but the Senate will remain in Republican control. Now, I want to talk to you about some of the state races that our teams were involved in. And tonight, I'm only going to be reporting on the general election contest that our teams were involved in, but our teams were involved in a ton of primary races as well this year. So I'm going to go through the states, and I'm going in alphabetical order, not naming any favorites here, but I'll start with Idaho. Idaho is an important state where we are hoping to pass our resolution in 2025. We managed to oust some COS opponents during primary season and replaced them with supporters. And we were looking to ensure that our champions won their races in the general election. So we were involved in 5 races in the general election. Of the 3 that have been called so far, our candidates have won all 3 of those. That's Brandon Mitchell in House District 6, Dory Healy in House District 15, and Dustin Manwaring in House District 29. So congratulations to them. Next is Iowa. Iowa is another state where we're very close to passing our application, and we believe 2025 may well be our year to do it. It's a mixed bag so far as our involvement in the general election in Iowa. Of 6 races, we have won 1, lost 2, and 3 haven't been called yet. 2 of those races are challengers trying to unseat an incumbent, which is a difficult thing to do. So the one race that we're sure we've won so far is Senate District 50, and that's Jeffrey Reichman. Congratulations to him. Now for Michigan. The Michigan House, as we mentioned, was a battleground chamber where we had hoped to help flip 3 seats in order to put the Republicans in control and produce a more favorable environment for passing our COS application. So we chose 3 particular challengers to support. Unfortunately, we lost in 2 of those, at least that's what it appears at this point, and 1 remains uncalled. So we're waiting to see what happens there, but apparently things are looking up for the Michigan House as a whole, so we're glad to see that. Next is Minnesota, where similar to Michigan, the Minnesota House was considered a battleground chamber, where our hope was to help give Republicans control to create a more supportive environment for passing our application. We chose 2 races for involvement, and neither of those has been called yet. So that leads us on to our next M state, which is Montana. Montana is a strong Republican state where we've made significant strides in recent years, thanks largely to our champion, Senator Tom McGilvery. We got involved in 7 races in the general election to try to put more supporters in office. 6 of those 7 have been called. We have won 4 of them and lost 2. So the winning COS supportive candidates were Gail Lammers in Senate District 21, Mike Yakovich in Senate District 24, Melissa Nikolakakis in House District 20, and Marty Malone in House District 57. Moving on to New Mexico. Our New Mexico team was just eager to get involved this year to try to get more COS supportive candidates in office and support our legislative champions. Of the 10 races we were involved in, 7 have been called so far, and our candidates won in 5 of those, including a challenger who picked off an incumbent. So those winning COS supportive candidates are Katie Duhigg in Senate District 10, Alan Martinez in House District 23, Rebecca Dow in House District 38, Lisa Terrazas in House District 39, and John Block, our great champion there in House District 51. And congratulations to those candidates. North Carolina. Now, as most of you know, North Carolina is a battleground state for Convention of States right now. We've already passed the House this session, and we still have a small window this year to pass through the Senate during the upcoming lame duck session. But our team was heavily involved in these elections to ensure that if that doesn't happen, we're well positioned to pass both chambers in 2025. Of the 20 races we were involved in the general election, 15 of them have been called, and we won 11 of those, including one challenger and one open seat. 3 of our challengers did lose, along with one candidate for an open seat. Of course, those are always really tough races and they're long shots, but we were out there supporting those challengers. So, the winning COS supportive candidates in North Carolina so far are Buck Newton in Senate District 4, Michael Lee in Senate District 7, Lisa Barnes in Senate District 11, Danny Britt in Senate District 24, Billy Ward in House District 5, Timothy Reeder in House District 9, Chris Humphrey in House District 12, Mike Scheitzold in House District 35, Aaron Perry in House District 37, Jared Lowry in House District 47, and Jonathan Almond in House District 73. Congratulations to them. Now moving on to Ohio. In Ohio, our team was focused on a ballot initiative called Issue 1. This was an effort to add literally pages of language to the Ohio Constitution, creating a new, unaccountable, unelected body to govern the redistricting process. Our team opposed Issue 1 as being contrary to self governance, and they were successful in helping Ohio voters to defeat Issue 1. Congratulations to our Ohio team. Now for South Carolina. South Carolina is a state that has already passed our Convention of States application, but our team there is still going strong and was heavily involved in the election. They were involved in 21 races, in fact, mostly working to help challengers unseat incumbents, which is, again, always a really difficult task. Even so, they won 12 of those seats and lost 9 of them. The winners were Paul Wickensheimer, House District 22, Brandon Newton, House District 45, Richie Yao in House District 53, Fawn Pedalino in House District 64, Harriet Holman in House District 102, James Teeple in House District 116, Roger Nutt in Senate District 12, Everett Stubbs in Senate District 17, Alan Blackman in Senate District 27, J.D. Chaplin in Senate District 29, Jeffrey Zell in Senate District 36, and Tom Fernandez in Senate District 39. Congratulations to them. And finally, Wyoming. Wyoming is a strong red state where we are working hard to get our COS application passed. And that strategy included ousting opponents in the primary and supporting COS champions in the general election. Our team was involved in 8 races in the general election, and it looks like we've won 6 of those so far, with the last 2 yet to be called. Those winning candidates in Wyoming were Jared Olson in Senate District 8, John Kolb in Senate District 12, Ocean Andrew in House District 46, Rob Geringer in House District 42, Daniel Singh in House District 61, and Marlene Brady in House District 60. I want to say a huge thank you to our grassroots teams who worked hard to impact their state legislative elections this year. Your efforts have been noticed and they matter. Thank you for doing the work of self-governance, and congratulations to all of our winning candidates.
Well, thank you so much, Rita, for joining us and providing us with that information. And congratulations to all of those candidates. It's exciting for me to have the opportunity to share this with all of you and for you to know exactly what it is that we're trying to accomplish with Convention of States. You know, on our button, it says Convention of States more than a convention. And this is exactly what we're talking about, right? There are other things that we do outside of just trying to lobby legislators to pass our resolution. That's obviously part of our goal, but it's not the only thing. And another thing that we need to do is we need to make sure we have pro COS legislators in this legislature, and we want to do everything we can to flex our political muscle when we can. And in fact, Producer G, I think we've got a great graphic to show everyone about all of the wins that we have had. So there are 37 candidate victories in races where Convention of States was involved in this legislative cycle. There are still 19 more races that have yet to be called. So we're going to be monitoring that, but already 37 victories. And then, as Rita mentioned, we also had that victory there in Ohio where we were able to help get ballot measure 1 defeated. This is all thanks to the power of our grassroots army, and a huge shout out to them. And also, I want to give a shout out to my fellow regional directors who have helped guide and direct and steer the ship for the grassroots activists on the ground. They've done a lot of great work as well. So amazing stuff. And we'll come back to that graphic here in a little bit when we have our guests on. In fact, why don't we go ahead and welcome our wonderful guests tonight? As I mentioned, we have the Grand Poobah of Convention of States, Mr. Mark Meckler, and of course, our senior advisor, Senator Rick Santorum. Good evening, gentlemen. How are you?
Oh, you're muted, Rick. I don't hear you.
Tired.
Look, I mean, I've got my fancy studio going on, but I think you're still at Newsmax, right?
I'm in the green room. Yeah, we're in the fancy green. There's Mark Lauder behind me. So Mark, just wave to the folks here at Convention States. Say hi. There you go.
Oh, that's awesome.
We're getting ready to do Rob Finnerty's show here in about 20 minutes or so. So you got me for a little while.
All right. Well,
let's go ahead and
Jonathan,
get to
do you have questions, or what do you want to do here?
I do. And, I want to start off with the presidential election. I think that's the big news out of last night. And, seeing Donald Trump being elected as the 47th president of the United States. And of course, the first time we had a former president run for a second term after losing since Grover Cleveland. We have not seen this kind of thing. So really what I'd like to start with is just, what was your instant reaction to what happened? And Senator Santorum, we can start with you.
Well, it's a remarkable testimony to his fortitude. And I mean, just think about it. Think of all the things that he endured. Obviously, assassination attempts, lawfare, impeachments, being accused of being a fascist, a Hitler. I mean, just on and on and on of the abuse that the man would take. And, you just consider what it would be like for you to go through any one of those things. And what it would, sometimes we sort of disconnect from what we see, and we don't try to put yourselves in that person's shoes and try to understand what's going on and how it affects their lives and how it affects your psyche, your psychological health, your physical health, your mental health. And for him to withstand all that, and not to mention all the things that happened in his presidency and Russiagate and all the other things, that just is an incredibly resilient man. And there's a lot of qualities you look for in a president. Resiliency is one of them. Someone who can sort of keep their head clear and be able to deal with the next thing, because the next thing's always coming. And I think that I really believe that maybe people didn't articulate it, but I think that's one of the things that people really are looking for in a president, clearly. But I think that's one of the things they saw that maybe unique in I don't know about human history, but unique in modern history, to see a man with that type of resilience and level-headedness and resilience, and his willing and his desire to keep going on. And finally, that people said, well, it's just an ego trip and he's a narcissist. I mean, that's the common thing. And Donald Trump has a big ego, and not very many in politics have small egos. But I think it's pretty clear, and I think he finally convinced the American public that, he has a mission that he really is trying to do, and that the mission is focused on helping, ordinary working Americans who've been left behind, and with the economy and with our immigration policy and a whole bunch of other things. So I think he connected in a way that the left just just is incapable of doing because they live in a utopian fantasy world and don't really care about people. They care about ideologies that has nothing to do with reality.
And Mark, how about you? What was your instant reaction as you were watching the polls come in?
Yeah, I mean, I would say euphoria. Look, I was really worried about the country. I wasn't one of those people who believe that the country would have been over if Donald Trump didn't win, but I would believe we would have been in for 4 years of very, very rough times. 4 years of investigations, of FBI raids, of imprisonments. I mean, very bad stuff. And so to be relieved of that, to have that burden lifted was fantastic. And number two is just an absolute gratitude for the American people. One of the things that I know that I think a lot of pundits and politicians don't necessarily get to see, Rick sees it, I see it, you see it, Jonathan, is we travel all over the country and we actually get to spend time with regular American people all over the country. I have a lot of faith in them. And when you see a big victory like this, a national victory, when you look at the numbers, you look at the demographics, it gives you hope for the American people. They were not willing to let America slide into the dustbin of history. They recognized that their republic was falling. They recognized that the economy was bad, that this woke stuff is crazy, that gender ideology is bad. When you get the majority of the American people that still recognize this, it gives you real hope for the future. And I would say I finished the night at 2:30 a.m. I went to sleep, I had a smile on my face, and I was filled with hope for America.
Yeah, it was just an amazing night all around. And Mark, if I can stick with you for a second, a lot was made coming into the election about the fascinating coalition Donald Trump built for this election, right? Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Elon Musk, Tulsi Gabbard, Joe Rogan, and others supported President Trump, campaigned for him. Some will even work in his administration. What kind of impact do you believe this had on the election? And does this signal a change in the base of the Republican Party, or is it just a coalition that is unique to President Trump?
Yeah, I think it remains to be seen how durable it is, but I do feel and sense a change in the base. I think you're looking at a big tent Republican Party for better and for worse. I would say on some issues for worse. I'm not thrilled with the way that the life issue has been treated by the party right now. I'm hoping that we get better at that. But when you see a Tulsi Gabbard come in, she literally was attacked by Hillary Clinton saying that she was a Russian plant. Incredible. She got tossed out of the Democrat Party like that, essentially. She found a home here. When you see Robert Kennedy, by the way, I know Tulsi, I know Kennedy. These are not people that you would consider even today, even through their transition, as dyed-in-the-wool Republicans. So the party now has what I would describe as a pretty solid center left. I think you could put Rogan in there as well. I mean, he's not a right winger. He's just pretty much of a centrist. Social issues, he's very left. So I think it's really interesting to see the breadth of the tent. Part of that is that those people were driven out of the left by the left as much as they were attracted by Trump. I think the thing that makes Trump unique is he's willing to make the deal, art of the deal, right? And so he's willing to work with people that Republicans might not have traditionally been willing to work with. I think you are going to see a transforming base here. Again, the coalition, how durable it is, I don't know. Does it go beyond Trump? I don't know. But looking at JD Vance, he's a pretty good standard bearer for the future.
No question about it. And that's COS supporter, Vice President JD Vance, or Vice President-elect JD Vance. He hasn't been sworn in yet. Senator Santorum, your home state of Pennsylvania was critically important to the presidential election, as it has been over the past couple of years, with it being a swing state. But it also played a critical role in determining the Senate majority and potential impacts on convention of states as well. But sticking with the presidential election for a moment, do you believe it was a fatal flaw of the Harris campaign to select Governor Tim Walz over Governor Josh Shapiro as a running mate? And did that decision ultimately impact other elections in the Keystone State?
I think it's hard to say. I mean, I think a lot of things I described before about what's sort of fundamentally wrong with the left in America and how a lot of Americans have figured it out was overwhelming. On the margins, vice president candidates matter. On the margins, it probably would have hurt Donald Trump. Hurt Donald Trump in Michigan. Hurt Kamala Harris in Michigan. But Michigan wasn't the big prize. Pennsylvania was a big prize for Kamala Harris. That was the big prize on election day, and she could have done better. But if you look at the three states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, Trump won Pennsylvania by more than any of the other two, and so I'm not sure a vice presidential candidate makes up 2.5 points in an election where you have such dominant things going on. I think Walz was not a net positive for him in any stretch of the imagination. I think Shapiro would have been more of a positive in Pennsylvania, but he would have been a negative in Michigan. So and the other thing is Shapiro's just, I mean, Walz is as he even said, he's a bumblehead. I mean, he's a goofball. Shapiro is is a lefty, and I'm not a big fan, but he's a great speaker. He's got a commanding presence, and I think he would have overshadowed her. I think that's the reason she didn't pick him, because he would have looked a lot better than she did, and done a better job, and I think that might have actually harmed her even more. There's no way that Tim Walz is going to overshadow anybody, and so I think that's what made her comfortable with picking him.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and it's one I haven't really heard. A lot of people made a lot about Governor Shapiro being Jewish and what that might do with the far left aspect of the Democrat Party. But I think you're absolutely right. And in terms of polish, he is much more polished than Governor Walz, and certainly so much more than Vice President Harris. So that very well could have played an impact in the selection process. So Senator Santorum, as of right now, it appears that Republicans will have control of the Senate and may also, it seems likely that they're going to maintain control of the House of Representatives. So how can President Trump take advantage of Republican control over the next 2 years, and what should his priority list be?
Yeah, they obviously definitely going to control the United States Senate. They'll have 52 votes, which is barely operational control. When you look at, there's 3 votes there in the Senate that are chronically votes that vote against what Republicans generally want to do. Number one, obviously, Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins. But let's not forget, even though he's a COS supporter, Rand Paul. Rand Paul tends to vote in ways that unfortunately align with the left more often than not on very critical issues. So it's a razor thin level of support for judges and for budget measures, which you can actually pass with a simple majority vote. That extra vote or 2, candidly, would be really big. And Dave McCormick, who is yet to be announced the winner, the more and more I've been talking a lot to the McCormick camp today. They feel pretty confident that he's actually going to hold on. He's up by 30,000 votes. They think that'll go up to about 50, 55 tonight. And they think he's going to hold on. There's late ballots. They're going to come in, and but they think they can overcome that. There's not going to be that many, at least enough to switch a 50,000 vote lead. But we'll wait and see. So far, it hasn't been called, but McCormick would be huge. That would be 53. And then the other one that they feel that they have a chance at is Nevada. Sam Brown is ahead by 1,000 votes or 500 votes. There's still a lot of votes to count in Nevada, but people feel like that's one that he could do. That Trump is actually stronger there than almost any state. Actually, the area that Trump's the strongest is Arizona, but Kerry Lake is running way behind all the other candidates in Arizona. I mean, all the other Senate candidates. I mean, if you look at Rogers and Hovde and McCormick and Brown, they've been running 1 or 2 points behind where Trump is. She's running 5, 4, 5, even at one point he was running 6 points behind. So it's a heavy lift, even though it can happen. If Trump lengthens his lead and gets it big enough, he might be able to carry into the United States Senate, but I wouldn't be counting on that one. So that's what the House, I mean, it's still not called. I mean, it's they're not at 218. And what I'm hearing is that they may be just at 218. So it's not going to be a very big majority. It's going to be a very dicey thing. Every single member of the House can control what goes on there. I do not envy Mike Johnson or Donald Trump. Hopefully Trump can provide some. This is an area where I think Trump could be really important, is the discipline in the House. I think he has the kind of support in the House that could really drive discipline. And even when you don't have a president, it's hard for a speaker to do it. But when you have obviously the figure of Donald Trump, pushing down on members, it's a lot more likely that you'll be able to get at least something done in a narrow majority. Right now, Speaker Johnson can't get very much done at all. That very well may be changing if they have any kind of majority. Gentlemen, I hate to do this, but they're standing there with my earpiece, and and I just got my makeup on. Hope I look pretty.
You're looking beautiful.
And I'm gonna have to skip off and do that. I'll sign in again when I'm done. If you guys are still bumping around, but for the meantime, I won't say tune me on a Newsmax because then I won't be watching you. So, all right, see you guys later.
Thanks,
Thank you so much, Senator Santorum. Really appreciate it. So, Mark, I'll give you the last question and the last word on the presidential race here, and then we can move on to the impacts on Convention of States. But what would you say are the lessons that can be learned from the 2024 presidential election?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. The biggest thing is when everybody digs in and participates, that we can win elections and that we can win elections on our issues. What happened to the Democrats, and an important lesson, is they were believing their own press, smoking their own supply, however you want to put it. The bottom line is that they went so deep into leftism that they lost the plot. The American people moved away because the American people are not into transgenderism, crazy transgender ideology. They're not into having kids read porn in the schools. They're not into fentanyl pouring across the border, an open southern border, sex trafficking, child trafficking. All these things were essentially supported by Democrats. It's kind of unbelievable in hindsight. They're not into weak foreign policy that gets us into wars. I mean, there's a weird crossover here that's very strange to me. It's the Republicans have always been sort of the hawkish party, the party of strong defense. But I also think that they're the party of strong defense now with the purpose of keeping us out of foreign wars. And for whatever reason now, the left has become just the absolute warmongering party. They're willing to spend infinite sums of money on war in other countries, and wars that don't even involve us, when our government is going broke. And so there's this weird realignment taking place. But the Democratic Party stopped paying attention to the American people. And the one thing you can say about Donald Trump is he pays attention to the people, and he does the issues and works on the issues that the American people want him to work on. So if you listen to the American people and you run a campaign that says what they want to hear and promises to do what they want, then I think you can win. Lastly, I want to say about Donald Trump is, and he said this last night, promises made, promises kept. And this was a theme of his first presidency. I know people who are on staff, and that was a thing he asked every day. Which of our campaign promises are we working on keeping today? Which campaign promise can I go out and tell the American people we've kept? He's made a lot of promises. I expect he's going to work very hard to keep those promises, and that his administration will be much more efficient, much more professional, much more disciplined, much more ready than they were last time.
Okay, I lied. I'm going to sneak in one more question about this. Let me ask, a lot was said after the 2020 presidential election and even in the 2022 election cycle about election integrity and the concerns around that. And now we have 2024, and I think a lot of the concerns were coming from the right side of the aisle, our side. People were concerned about it. And here it seems like the election has gone smoothly, and obviously people on our side will feel comfortable with the results. Do you think enough was done to secure the election, generally speaking, or is there more that can be done, and can Convention of States play a role in that?
I think it was a lot better. One, kudos to the RNC, the NRLA, National Republican Lawyers Association, within the RNC. They had a plan, and they had lawyers on the ground all over the place. Every time there was a problem, they had lawyers reacting. And so I think it was just completely different with the RNC under Laura Trump's stewardship, as opposed to the way it was last time around. So I'm really pleased. Harmeet Dillon out there on the ground doing yeoman's work all across the country. Very impressed by her. She was there, I think, in Maricopa County for the end of it. My son, Jacob, is a lawyer that works out there for America First Legal in his day job. He volunteered for the RNC. He was out in Reno watching what was going on in Nevada. So I just think there were so many eyes all over it and so much attention being paid, so many grassroots volunteers all over the country, that they just couldn't cheat the way that they did in the last cycle. Interesting, and I've seen this stat popping up all over the internet, There were 20 million more votes cast in 2020 than 2024. Now that seems impossible. Seems impossible because everywhere I was hearing people were talking about record turnouts. You heard election officials saying this all over the country. Where did those 20 million voters go? They happen to have appeared in 2020 and disappeared in 2024. I think the Trump administration is going to have to look into that. So, all that being said, I think election security is better, and we are not even close to being where we should be. And convention of states can help with this. There should be a constitutional election integrity amendment. That amendment, in my opinion, should require voter ID to vote. You should absolutely have to present voter ID. The vast majority of the American public thinks so. It should prevent same day registration. If you can't get registered to vote a couple of weeks in advance, you're not serious, you're not an educated voter, and you shouldn't vote. All kinds of things we can do. We should get rid of voting machines. No civilized country in the world, no first world country is using voting machines anymore. There's no such thing as a secure voting machine. We need to get rid of those. We need to go back to paper ballots. We should have a statute that requires same day results, and there should be penalties for states or internal jurisdictions in states that can't produce results in the same day. Look, if Texas can do it, if Florida can do it, there's absolutely no reason Arizona can't do it. I was looking at the results, Jonathan, for Arizona, 63%. Florida's done. Texas is done. Arizona's a much smaller state. Why can't they be done? So all of these things could be part of a constitutional amendment that could clean up our election integrity.
Absolutely. You know, I think somebody joked online, Florida had counted, I think it was 10.5 million votes within, the first half hour or so after the polls closed. And then an hour later, they said Florida went back and counted them again, and they were done before these other states.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was true, but it was funny. Okay, so now let's transition to discussing the impact of yesterday's results on Convention of States. And producer G, if you wouldn't mind showing our audience that graphic again about the results nationwide. So, Mark, we had 37 candidate wins that we were involved in. There's still 19 candidates in races that have been yet to have been called. And then, of course, we also had that victory there in Ohio. How did you feel coming into the election, and what do you feel after seeing the results, particularly with the races that we were involved in?
Yeah, I would say I'm just super proud of our activists. The stuff that doesn't even show up there, Jonathan, is we were involved in a lot more races with just get out the vote, what we call nonpartisan get out the vote. So probably in the hundreds of races. I think our grassroots activists did an incredible job. When you look at those numbers, 37 races won. It doesn't take that many races in a state legislature to have an effect on how the legislature views convention of states. When they know we're out there helping and we're working for them wherever it's legal, they become very favorable to our cause. They appreciate our activists. I also think it shows that we're raising up a generation of activists that know how to do politics broadly writ. And this is important. It's not just enough to learn how to support and lobby convention of states. You have to learn how the electoral process works. We have people who run for office now. We have people who are helping people run for office. And we are, as you showed there, directly helping in campaigns across the country. That 37 number is going to go much higher. I don't know if we'll win all outstanding 19 of them, but even if we win half of those, say another 10, that's 47 candidates that we put into office. That's almost at least one per state. I know it's not spread out that way. The impact's a lot more because we're getting more per state. I think it's going to make a tremendous difference. My hope for the next cycle is that we do a lot more. And part of it is our ability to raise money to do those things. And so we need to raise more money. We need to get more support, and we need more activists involved. I'm hoping that by the midterms, so that would be 2026, and actually maybe even in Virginia in 2025. Virginia is a off-cycle election. I know our activists will be participating there. Hopefully we can dive in deep and we can double or triple our impact by the next cycle.
Yeah, that would be amazing. And it is really exciting. And you're right. There's so much more that is happening from our activists that are not shown in those numbers. And those numbers are extremely impressive. But, I think back to when we were just talking about election integrity, and you were talking about how many eyes there were. And I know so many members of our grassroots teams that were out there working the polls, watching some of the returns that were coming in, and making sure that things were on the up and up, and being done in the proper process. So our activists are just incredible with everything that they're doing, not just in terms of trying to get people out to vote or get candidates elected, but also being part of the entire process of the election and making sure things remain secure. So, Mark, let me also ask you this: after seeing everything that's come in, and I know we still are waiting the results on some of these elections, but tell me, what are you most excited about for Convention of States heading into 2025?
Man, there's a whole bunch of states that I'm super excited about. Rita mentioned one, and that's North Carolina. North Carolina, we passed the House. We're still pending in the Senate. We could get it done still this year. Their Senate will be back in session. Let's see, not this coming week, but in the following week. It's going to be a squeaker. I think they're going to be in for 2 or 3 days. We're working with a bunch of them. We helped in North Carolina a lot. We think they can shove that across the finish line in the last few days of session. And that would be our 20th state. So that would be really exciting. I'm excited, and this has nothing to do with the election, but I'm excited about Kansas. Kansas, we did pass, but there's some litigation around it. I expect that litigation to be resolved in the next couple of months. One of the things Rita does, she's a genius lawyer. She was actually working on a responsive brief in that case today, I know, as was Mike Ferris. So I'm excited about that. And that'll bring it down to a simple majority requirement in Kansas. It'll make it very easy for us to pass in Kansas. That would be state number 21. Super, super excited about South Dakota. Everything I'm hearing in South Dakota, I mean, we've been laboring there. Our grassroots are long suffering. They do an incredible job. They drive all the way across the state in sub-zero temperatures to be there to be there for committee hearings, which are usually at 7 a.m. I mean, you have no idea how hard that is. That state is very spread out. It looks good. I mean, we have leadership in both houses in favor of Convention of States' new Senate president. We think he might potentially sponsor. He's a big fan. Looks like the person who is most likely to be speaker is a big fan. Maybe will sponsor as well. So I think South Dakota is teed up really well. I'm super interested and excited about Montana. Wyoming, I think the House might have got a little bit more difficult, but I think we still have momentum there. You saw some great victories that Rita was showing there. Idaho, I'm really interested in. I find it a little bit frustrating. The GOP that took over, it's a lot of John Birch Society folks. They are unfriendly to COS. That's the party itself, but we got a lot of support in the legislature. So Idaho's a possibility. Iowa, we've been close in Iowa for several years. I think Iowa is looking good this year. I'm excited about Iowa. So there's just a lot happening. I expect to spend a lot of time on the road. Rick Santorum will as well. Mike Ferris will as well. I know you're out there on the road a whole bunch. I think you and I are going to see each other this week in Texas, aren't we?
Absolutely. And I'm looking forward to it. And the Texas team has been doing some great work as well. And we're excited for what we've got coming up in the upcoming session. So Mark, based on the results yesterday, and I know we're still trying to process and digest them all, but are there any states that, and let me also say, we're involved in all of the states, right? We've got grassroots activists out there, but inevitably we're focused particularly on some states where we feel like we're closer to passing than some others. That's not to say we neglect any of those, but there are some that are just
Right.
closer to the finish line than some other ones. But we do see some surprises, right? So, for example, Massachusetts, we were able to get through committee. In Hawaii, we had a similar situation there as well. Are there any states that, based on the election results yesterday, that you think maybe weren't necessarily on the radar or weren't as close, but now they may be somebody that we could see a surprise next year or within the next 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one is the one I started with, which is South Dakota. I did not expect to be in as good a shape as we are now. The legislature has turned over a bit. A lot of our opponents are out of the legislature now. We had opponents who were in leadership in both houses. They're out of the legislature now. And this is actually a reminder to be patient. You know, legislatures turn over. People don't realize this, that in 5 years in the average state legislature, you'll see 50% turnover. Think about that. 5 years, 50%. We tend to think about the people who stick around forever, but that's not most people. And so what that means is when you have sticking points in a legislature, by sticking points, I mean people who are a problem for you, the odds are they're going to move on. And we're not. We're going to stick around. We're going to be here. Our grassroots are in the fight for the long haul. So I think South Dakota is a really good lesson in just sticking around, just doing the hard work, being persistent. So I'm really interested in seeing what happens there. That kind of went up to the top of the list. Look, there are states that are sleeper states. One of those states I would say is Illinois, and it's not that I expect to pass in Illinois this session, but I do expect progress there. We have Democrat sponsors, I think multiple Democrat sponsors now in Illinois. And I think that's just extraordinary. It shows a model. I think, as you mentioned, Massachusetts, super interesting because we've been able to get out of committee a couple of years in a row. Our goal is to get to a floor vote. We thought we might have been getting there in this last session. We didn't quite make it to the floor, but I'm excited that we might. Connecticut is super interesting to me. I'm really frustrated by Connecticut. That's state number 50. If we can get them to file the resolution, it's the only state that hasn't filed the resolution. They have kind of a weird, complex process for how things get filed. You have to file sort of a placeholder descriptor bill first. That's not an official filing until that gets approved. We haven't had that approved. I've been assured by the Republicans I met with in this last year that this coming session, we're going to get it done. So that'll be state number 50 to have actually officially filed the COS resolution. So that's another place where I feel that's progress. And one of the things I want people to understand about the political process is that, generally speaking, progress is incremental. Now, as human beings, we don't like that. We want immediate results. Trust me, I'm out there in the field away from my family. I just want to win. I don't want to lose. I don't want incrementalism. I want to go big, but it just doesn't work that way. And I've learned over time that it just takes time and that you've got to be patient. And incrementalism in our case means first you find a sponsor. Maybe you don't even get into committee. Maybe the next year you get into committee, but you never get a hearing. And then maybe the next cycle you get into committee, you get a hearing and you lose. Maybe next cycle, get into committee, you get a hearing and you get out of committee, but you never make it to the floor. And maybe the next cycle, you make it to the floor, but you never get a vote, and so on. And so it just takes time. And the people who win are the people who are patient. You know, I did a call with Mike Ferris about a week or 10 days ago. If you haven't had a chance to see it, it's Mike Ferris and I going through kind of the fundamentals of convention of states and dealing with the primary objections. He said something on that call, Jonathan, that I'd never heard before. You know, he's one of the primary movers and shakers in the early homeschool movement. Ultimately, when he started, there was no legal homeschooling in America. Ultimately, when he was done, it was legal in all 50 states. And he said, that took me 25 years from start to finish.
Wow.
25 years. So I want you to think about that. He dedicated 25 years of his life to a single cause across the nation to make it happen. If he didn't have the patience, if the activists didn't have the patience, if the legislators didn't have the patience, homeschooling would not be legal in all 50 states. So when I look at him doing that, look, we've been doing this 11 years now. We're not even halfway to how long it took Mike Ferris to get homeschooling legal. Now, we have better technology. We have a better organization at this point because of that technology and all the lessons Mike learned along the way. So I don't expect it to take us 25 years. But look at that. Look how important that is in American history, what he did. And don't be in too much of a hurry. We're going to get it done.
Well said. Well said. So I've got one last question for you, Mark, and then we've got some great questions from the audience that I'd like to shoot at you as well.
Yeah.
But I think we have to answer this question because it's just going to happen, especially now that we have President Trump back in office. So what will you say to folks when inevitably there are going to be legislators, there are going to be supporters that are going to say to you, we don't need to worry about the Constitution. You're laughing because you know what I'm coming. We don't need to worry about the Constitution. President Trump is in office. Nothing to worry about here. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I would say is, are you dumb? No, I'm just kidding. I wouldn't say that. I'm not that mean, but it is kind of dumb because we already saw this. Like, we've lived this, right? So President Trump did a lot of good things in his first term. God bless him. He took the slings and arrows for us, and he got a lot of good stuff done. Almost all of it got reversed in the first 5 days of the Biden administration. And so what we need to do as convention states is come alongside Donald Trump, come alongside Vice President-elect Vance, who is a supporter. I think Vivek Ramaswamy is going to be in there somewhere in the administration. Come alongside Ramaswamy and make permanent through constitutional amendment some of the things that they're going to do. There are just things like they want to get rid of a bunch of administrative agencies. Well, the Democrats will bring them back if they get back in power. So let's make that permanent. Let's remove the authority for the federal government to have agencies like the EPA or the Department of Health and Human Services or the Department of Education. Let's get rid of these. not just by executive fiat, not just because they get defunded by the Trump administration, but permanently, structurally, let's remove the authority of the federal government. So that's coming alongside Trump and making things permanent that he wants to do. There are things that President Trump has no authority to do, he can't do, so he's not going to do things like let's impose term limits. Look, I know that he would be in favor of this idea. Many elected officials are, not as many as we would like, but Congress itself will never do that. And Trump can never do that. He can advocate for it, and we can get to a convention while he's in office. He can advocate for term limits for federal officials, and that would include staffers and bureaucrats. Trump can't do that. There's no way he can do that. So we can do that. I don't believe that the federal government is going to impose a balanced budget amendment. I don't want them to just balance their budget. I don't even know if they'll do that. I doubt they'll do that, but I want more than that. I want constitutional guardrails requiring a balanced budget like the vast majority of states have. And the only way we get that is by a convention of states to get that done. You know, another one you and I talked about a little bit earlier was we need election reform. We need permanent election reform. Donald Trump can do some of that, some legislatively with the help of a Senate and a House, and maybe he will. But we need to ensconce those protections for our electoral system in the Constitution. And we can do that. And we can do this in partnership with J.D. Vance, soon to be Vice President Vance, with President Trump, soon to be the 47th president of the United States, working side by side with the administration and folks in Washington, D.C., who believe in this permanent structural change. I believe we can get that stuff done. Trump can't do that stuff permanently by himself. He's going to do a great job, I have no doubt. He's going to do even way better than he did last time. Now he's got the House, the Senate. He has a lot of experience. But if we want permanent change, and why wouldn't we want permanent change? The only way to do that is to call a convention of states and propose and ratify amendments.
Absolutely well said. And that's it. You're absolutely right, because these are things that I know President Trump will do, and he will get a lot of great things done. But anything that's, I think Ted Cruz used to say this when he was running for president, anything done by or decreed by executive order can be undone by executive order. And so we can't just legislate that way. We need to make sure these fixes are permanent, and convention of states can give us that opportunity. So some of the questions we have from our audience, Mark. So Gary wrote in and he said, if the House of Representatives isn't held by Republicans, what are your concerns about the new people that would be in charge? I think probably Hakeem Jeffries might be the potential speaker if the Democrats were to control the House. So what would your concerns be about that?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking the worst of the worst, and they're going to try to impose all the crazy woke stuff. Really, what they're going to end up doing is just impeding Donald Trump's agenda. The legislative agenda will just get completely stalled. I believe there will be immediate impeachment hearings. So we're going to go through those shenanigans all over again. They will be investigating Trump constantly. They will have authority to do so if they take over the House. The good news is I just don't think that's going to happen. I'm looking at up here on my upper monitor, Decision Desk HQ, which I followed all during the election last night. They are projecting 221 to 214 margin for Republicans. So that's 7 seats. It's not quite as big as I might like to see for a really mandate authority, but 7 seats does give Mike Johnson a little bit of breathing room. I have to say, I know some people are frustrated with him. I think he did the best he could. I think Mike Johnson is the most conservative speaker, most conservative man to hold the speaker's gavel, certainly in my lifetime and maybe ever. So I think with Mike Johnson with a 6 or 7 seat majority, the Senate we're going to have right now, we have a 2-seat majority, but that could end up being more than that. It's probably, I think it might even be 3 seats now, could be 4 or 5. I think with those things, I think Trump can run the table. The real question is, how bold will the Republicans in the House and Senate be immediately? And when I say immediately, they ought to be doing this stuff the first day. I don't want to hear about the 100-day agenda. I don't want the opposition to have a chance to organize. I want to hear about the 10-day agenda. I want to hear about the first day agenda. They should have bills drafted, ready to go, and be slamming this stuff through so that the left has no chance to respond.
Well said. And I should also point out that Mike Johnson, also huge COS supporter, helped us get it done in Louisiana. So with him and Vice President-elect JD Vance, a lot of COS supporters at top spots here in the new administration. So very, very exciting. Heather wrote in and she said, what would you have done if Kamala won the presidential election? So I'm sure, Mark, you would have crawled up in a ball and started crying and just totally given up, right?
I would probably look like one of those leftists weeping and gnashing my teeth on the internet. No, look, it would have bummed me out. I'm going to be honest with you. Like, I would have felt very differently when I went to sleep last night, but I would have woken up this morning with the same determination I have right now. And also literally the same hope for America, because I know the American people, and whether it swings 2%, 2 points one way or another, I have faith in the American people, and I believe we were still going to save the republic. So I would be fighting just as hard. I would be fighting to do exactly what I'm fighting to do in the legislatures. I would just feel like we have a little bit of a headwind as opposed to a tailwind. We have a big tailwind right now. I just want to encourage people, don't stop now. Don't slow down. We have momentum. This is the time to redouble your efforts, fight twice as hard, 3 times as hard. I'm going to fight more than I've ever fought before. So if you donate, I'm asking you to donate more. If you're a volunteer, I'm asking you to volunteer more. Now is the time to get it done. People are excited. We got the wind at our backs. Again, and I'm going to tell you, I hope that President Trump joins the cause. I think there's a chance. He's got his vice president as a supporter. He's got the Speaker of the House as a supporter. So he's surrounded by people. Vivek Ramaswamy has expressed support. He's surrounded by people who express support for Convention of States. I could see Trump coming on board as well, and that would be historic and monumental, and I think it would move things along a lot faster.
I'm also getting word that we have been joined again by Senator Rick Santorum, so it's great to have you back, sir.
Take care, buddy. Hello. How are you?
How are you? Thank you so much for coming back.
Back on the air again.
Well, we are.
Hey, Rick,
I promise we'll let you go.
One of the things that we were just talking about is the idea, right now we've got the Vice President-elect JD Vance has been a supporter of Convention of States. You've got Mike Johnson's been a supporter of Convention of States. We're just talking about the possibility, and I know we haven't really talked to him about it. I talked to him briefly several years ago. What do you think about Donald Trump, the possibility of Donald Trump perhaps at some point supporting?
Look, I think at this point, Trump is a disruptive force. He's got 4 years to be a disruptor. But as we all know, most of the disruption is going to come through executive action, not through any kind of lasting legislative impact, because you can get a supermajority in the Senate to get things done. And I think Donald Trump doesn't want to be what he was 4 years ago, which is someone who disrupted, and then 4 years later, the left came back with a vengeance and wiped out everything he did. And I think what we need to do is lay out to him and his team that this is a way for him to have a much more lasting impression. And if he's successful, I don't know what happened in the state legislatures, whether we actually picked up any legislatures over in this election cycle. But the ability this time to be able to go to those legislatures, many of whom were elected running with Donald Trump, and getting Trump to be supportive could be a real silver bullet to the movement, at least in the short term.
Yeah. One last thing. Jonathan asked me this question, so I want to pass it along to you. We know that we're going to have people say to us, I've already heard it, like, okay, well, Trump's in now. We got the Senate. Looks like I think we're going to have the House. By the way, Decision Desk, I don't know what you think about this, but Decision Desk.
That's who we use. We use Decision Desk at Newsmax.
Okay, so their projection for the House is 221, 214.
That's great. Terrific.
So terrific. That's, I wouldn't call it a significant majority, but it's an operational majority.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know. It'll be one of the smallest majorities in history of the country. So just for the record,
than where we were. How about bigger than where we were at?
That's because we had a bunch of dead people. It's not.
So, but people are going to say, look, we got the House and Senate, we got Trump, everything's going to be fine. Why do we even need a convention of states now? What would you say to that?
Well, you're not talking about, again, long-term thing. Here, hold on. Rob Finnerty's here. Rob, come around and say hello. I'm doing a what are you? I don't know what you call these. This is Rob, host of What's the name of the show?
It's called Finnerty.
Finnerty.
On
That's it. I
Newsmax.
couldn't
Yep.
remember.
8 p.m.
Finnerty.
Eastern. Tell
Yeah.
your friends.
8 p.m. Eastern, Rob Finnerty, right here.
Thank you, sir.
So, yeah, you know, I gave him his big break, and he's been able to get a show out of the morning. We used to do the morning show together, and nobody else would watch. And I was just, gone on social media and talked about how great he was. And here he is, 8 o'clock, and he's had the show a month. This is the second time he's had me on. Not saying he forgot about me. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that he forgot about me, but it's
technically third time I've had him on.
Yeah.
By the way.
Yeah. Just he had Sage Steele. The reason it took me so long, he had Sage Steele on for the segment before me, and went like 25 minutes. And so we got on and we I said goodnight, and that was sort of the end.
Look,
that was the segment.
We can tell who's important there at Newsmax, right?
Yeah, yeah, who the real driver is here. Anyway.
All right, so we'll close out with this. It's not
your question. Yeah,
look,
sorry.
people are coming. They're saying we got Trump, we got the House, we got the Senate. We don't need to do a convention of states.
Again, as I said before, 4 years ago we had that House. We had the Senate, we had Donald Trump, and 4 years later, we were heading to hell in a handbasket again because the Democrats took over. You need structural change. We need change that's going to be permanent and make it and allow the whole structure of government to prevent a lot of this leftward, all of this leftward lurch in America and totalitarian lurch in America. And the only way to do that is through. Okay, I'll drop in. Thanks. We need that if we're going to be successful, and the convention of states is the mechanism that was put there by the founders, and it's still the best way to go about it.
All right,
only way to go about it.
I know it's Rick. It's late for you. You've been going 2 days.
I got about an hour and a half of sleep last night. I was going to about 2:30 this morning, and then I was up at 5 o'clock to do this. I hit the top of the 6 o'clock show to give the whole rundown of what happened last night, and have been on almost every hour since. And you might tell I'm a tad punchy, just not much, but a little punchy. No alcohol, no caffeine. This is all natural. I'm just telling you, this is all natural.
And they say Trump has a lot of energy. I'm impressed.
That's
there
right.
You go. Thanks.
All right,
so
Jonathan,
much,
anything we
Henry.
need to do before we close out?
That is it. I can cut you guys loose. Thank you so much for being here, and God bless you. And we look forward to seeing you out on the trail and accomplishing great things for Convention of States in 2025 and beyond.
I'll be out there.
Thank
Look
you
forward
both.
to seeing folks on the trail.
See you guys.
All right.
Thank you. God bless. All right, ladies and gentlemen, before I announce our next program and close out the show tonight, I want to take a moment to acknowledge a date coming up on the calendar. This coming Monday is November 11th, otherwise known as Veterans Day. Convention of States activists are filled with many veterans. Countless veterans make up these activist teams, and we're so grateful for all of them. And the reason that they are still involved so much with Convention of States is because they believe with all of their hearts that their oath to our country never expires. We're so grateful for them and all of our veterans. As Ronald Reagan said, veterans know better than anyone else the price of freedom, for they've suffered the scars of war. We can offer them no better tribute than to protect what they have won for us. This grateful American will follow President Reagan's advice, and I will do all that I can to protect what our veterans have won for us. I hope that you will join me, but may God bless our veterans as well as their families for all of that they have sacrificed to safeguard our freedoms. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank them and wish them a happy Veterans Day. We are just so grateful for all of them involved with Convention of States, all of them out there in our country, as well as their families. So thank you so much. Just a reminder, folks, all of the COS at Home shows air live on the first Wednesday of every month. You never know what's going to happen. We've got Senator Santorum dropping off and coming back on. It's always a fun time here on COS at Home. So join us the first Wednesday of every month, 8 o'clock Eastern time. Our next show will be on Wednesday, December 4th, and we will have as our guest America's Constitution coach and the founder of Patriot Academy, Rick Green. We're really looking forward to having America's Constitution coach back on the program to talk about all things Convention of States, Patriot Academy, and I'm sure he's got a lot to say about what took place last night. So join us for that and so much more on Wednesday, December 4th. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, this has been a ton of fun. As I mentioned, you never know what's going to happen on COS at Home. I hope that you've enjoyed the show and that it's been helpful to you. Thanks again to Mark, Rita, and Senator Santorum for joining us tonight. And of course, as always, the big thank you to the legend producer G for all of his hard work behind the scenes, putting up with me and dealing with me, procrastinating and not getting the script together until just a couple hours before the show. And of course, all the wonderful graphics and everything that he puts together. He's just the man, and I'm so grateful for him. However, the greatest thanks goes to all of you for your continued support of the Convention of States and Article 5 movement. And with Thanksgiving coming up, I would like to extend the happiest of Thanksgivings to you and your loved ones. Our organization is so thankful, so grateful for all of the support from our activists, from our supporters, everyone that tunes into this program and is involved with Convention of States in various different ways. So I hope that all of you have a wonderful, wonderful Thanksgiving. Now, I typically, when I close out the show, I do so with a reminder that despite all the problems we currently face in our country, you and I, we the people, are the solution. In my opinion, the people took action last night to rectify problems caused by this current presidential administration. That is an excellent first step, but it is only a first step. And you heard Mark talking and Senator Santorum talking about this before. We need to remain engaged throughout the next 4 years, and even more so at the state level. That's what we will be doing with Convention of States. That's what I will be doing. That's what our activists will be doing. And I hope that you will join us and get involved by going to conventionofstates.com and signing up to become a volunteer. But thank you all so much for your time this evening. God bless you. And I really look forward to seeing you in December, as we are very excited about what this future has for our great nation. I want to wish you all a happy Thanksgiving once again. Have a great evening, and God bless you all.